Everyone believed the most feared crime lord in the city had survived an assassination because he was impossible to kill. They were wrong. He survived because death had chosen something crueler. Instead of taking his life, it stole his appetite. Every elegant meal placed before him became another battle he could never win. Every expensive ingredient reminded him of poison. Every bite awakened memories of burning pain inside his stomach. Slowly, the ruler of one of the largest criminal organizations on the East Coast began wasting away inside his own mansion. His enemies celebrated quietly. They no longer needed another assassin. Time was finishing the job. Damien Moretti stared at the untouched dinner sitting across from him. The lamb had been roasted perfectly. Fresh rosemary rested across the top. A rich red wine sauce shimmered beneath it. The chef who prepared it had won international culinary awards. None of that mattered. Damien couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. The smell alone twisted his stomach. He slowly pushed the plate away. Across the dining room, his longtime right-hand man, Marco Alvarez, watched with growing concern. "You've eaten almost nothing today," Marco said carefully. Damien rubbed his temples. "I know. You've lost another 5 pounds. I know. The doctor." "I don't care what another doctor says." Silence filled the enormous room. Months earlier, one of Damien's captains had betrayed him. Not with bullets, not with bombs, with poison. A slow mixture of toxic metals hidden inside a tiny cup of espresso. The doctors had saved Damien's life after weeks in intensive care. But they couldn't erase what happened afterward. His body healed. His mind never did. Every meal felt dangerous. Every smell convinced him someone was trying to kill him again. The specialists called it severe trauma. The psychologists called it conditioned fear. Damien called it hell, because every single day he wanted to eat. And every single day his own body refused. He stood slowly. The room tilted. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision. Marco rushed forward. "I've got you. I'm fine." Damien steadied himself against the heavy oak table until the dizziness faded. His expensive Italian suit hung loosely around his shoulders. 3 months earlier it had fit perfectly. Now it looked borrowed. "Fire the chef." Marco sighed. "Boss, he isn't the problem." "No." Damien looked toward the untouched meal. "But he'll pay for reminding me." Across the estate, someone else worried about food for a very different reason. Emily Carter pushed an old mop across polished marble floors. Her shift had started before sunset. It would end close to dawn. She worked as part of the overnight cleaning crew inside Moretti Holdings, the legitimate business empire that quietly funded Damien's criminal organization. Emily knew better than to ask questions. The paycheck arrived every Friday. That was enough. She desperately needed it. 6 months earlier, her younger brother had disappeared after gambling away nearly $50,000. The loan sharks couldn't find him, so they found her instead. Since then, every dollar she earned went toward paying a debt she never created. She lived in a tiny apartment, skipped meals, worked 2 jobs, smiled whenever collectors came knocking, because smiling hurt less than arguing. Tonight was no different. Her stomach growled loudly as she scrubbed another hallway. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. 1 stale sandwich. Half a bottle of water, nothing else. A security guard walked past carrying a radio. "East Corridor." Emily looked up. "Sir?" Someone spilled wine near the executive kitchen. "I'll clean it." She grabbed her bucket and hurried away. The executive kitchen inside the estate looked more like a luxury restaurant than a place where people actually cooked. Rows of polished steel counters reflected bright ceiling lights. Copper cookware hung from custom racks. Imported ingredients filled refrigerators larger than most bedrooms. Emily knelt outside the swinging doors, cleaning the dark red wine stain. Suddenly, the doors exploded open. A furious chef stormed into the hallway. He ripped off his white jacket and threw it onto the floor. "I refuse." He shouted to nobody in particular. "I trained for 20 years to create masterpieces. I'm not wasting another minute cooking for a man who refuses to eat." He kicked a trash can before storming toward the exit. Emily froze when his footsteps disappeared. She looked through the open doorway. Nobody remained inside. The kitchen was empty. She finished cleaning, then glanced once more toward the silent room. Her stomach growled again. Louder. Almost painfully. She hesitated. Only for a moment. Then quietly stepped inside. The scent of butter, fresh herbs, roasted vegetables, filled the air. Expensive meals covered every workstation. Most had barely been touched before being discarded. Emily ignored them. She wasn't stupid. Taking prepared food from this house could cost her job, maybe worse. Instead, she searched through containers marked for disposal. Bruised carrots, half an onion, chicken bones, wilted celery, a handful of leftover rice. Perfect. She smiled. To wealthy people, it was garbage. To Emily, it was dinner. It turned a small but added water, dropped in the bones. Then chopped vegetables with practiced speed. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just honest food. Exactly what her grandmother had taught her when money disappeared before the month ended. She crushed garlic beneath the side of a knife, added salt, black pepper, a tiny splash of olive oil. Then let everything simmer quietly. Warm steam drifted upward. The smell instantly reminded her of childhood. Snow outside. Old blankets. Her grandmother humming softly while soup cooked on the stove. For the first time all day, Emily relaxed. She poured the finished broth into a plain white bowl, picked up a spoon, and smiled. Tick-tack, and smile. The kitchen door opened. Emily nearly dropped the bowl. Marco entered carrying a folder filled with business documents. He looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He barely noticed Emily. Instead, he stopped walking. He inhaled deeply, then looked directly at the bowl of soup. What is that? Emily blinked. My dinner. Marco stepped closer. It smells. He frowned. Different. She nodded nervously. It's just vegetable broth. Marco leaned closer. It didn't smell rich. It didn't smell expensive. It smelled comforting. Simple. Safe. Exactly the opposite of everything the professional chefs had been serving. Without another word, Marco grabbed a serving tray, placed the bowl onto it, picked up a spoon. Emily stared. Marco was already walking away. It's only scraps. He paused at the doorway, then quietly answered. Maybe that's exactly what he needs. The doors swung shut. Emily stood alone, looking at the empty counter. Her dinner had disappeared. And somewhere upstairs, the most feared man in the city was about to taste the simplest meal she'd ever made. Power always attracts attention. For months, rival organizations had watched Damien Moretti weaken. Territories shifted. Old alliances cracked. Small-time crews grew bold enough to delay payments and question orders. But once Damien recovered, everything changed. Within weeks, the rumors spread through every underground club, private casino, and shipping dock along the coast. The king was healthy again. No one understood how. Some whispered about experimental medicine. Others believed a secret specialist from Europe had cured him. Only one man refused to believe in miracles. Victor Kane, head of the West Harbor Syndicate, the same man who had secretly financed the poisoning months earlier. Victor sat inside his penthouse overlooking the city. The cigar burned slowly between his fingers while reports covered his desk. He gained nearly 20 pounds? His lieutenant nodded. Yes, impossible. He has resumed meetings. Shipments. Running ahead of schedule. Victor's jaw tightened. The poison should have finished him. It almost did. So what changed? The lieutenant hesitated. Our source inside the estate mentioned a woman. Victor looked at the woman, the cook. He laughed. A cook brought Damien Moretti back from the dead? Apparently she prepares every meal personally. Victor's smile disappeared. Find out everything. Meanwhile, Emily remained completely unaware that strangers had begun saying her name. She was busy making fresh pasta in the kitchen. Flour covered the countertop. Soft music played quietly from an old radio she had found in storage. She hummed absent-mindedly while kneading dough. The kitchen door opened. Damien entered carrying several business files. Yes, and Emily looked embarrassed. Only when nobody's listening. I've been listening for 5 minutes. She laughed softly. Then pretend you weren't. Damien set the folders aside. You make this look easy. It isn't. She held up her flour-covered hands. It just takes practice. He watched her roll the dough into long sheets. You learned from your family? My grandmother. She raised me after my parents died. Damien remained silent. Emily kept working. She believed food solved more problems than arguments. Did it? Most of the time. What about the other times? She smiled sadly. She made dessert. For the first time that week, Damien laughed. A genuine laugh. A genuine laugh. That's not polite. Emily looked surprised. I didn't know you could do that. I'd forgotten. The peaceful moment ended when Marco hurried into the kitchen. His expression instantly erased Damien's smile. What happened? Marco lowered his voice. We intercepted one of Kane's men near the docks. Damien's face hardened. Talking? He talked enough. What did he want? Marco glanced briefly toward Emily, then back to Damien. He was asking about your cook. The room fell silent. Emily slowly placed the rolling pin onto the counter. Me? Marco nodded. They know someone changed your condition. Damien's eyes became dangerously calm. How much do they know? Not much, but they're looking. Emily tried to laugh it off. Why would anyone care about me? Neither man answered. That silence frightened her far more than any explanation could have. That evening, Damien assigned 2 security officers to accompany Emily everywhere outside the estate. She protested immediately. This is ridiculous. I'm just buying groceries. Exactly. I've lived alone for years. And now things are different. Emily crossed her arms. I don't need bodyguards. Damien stepped closer. I wasn't asking. She looked directly into his eyes. You can't control every part of my life. No, he answered quietly. But I can protect the parts that matter. She wanted to argue. Instead, she sighed. 2 days later, Emily visited her favorite neighborhood market. The 2 security officers remained several steps behind as she picked fresh vegetables. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until someone bumped into her shoulder. She turned. A middle-aged man wearing a gray jacket smiled politely. Sorry. No problem. As he walked past, he whispered without looking at her. Keep feeding him. Emily froze. The man continued walking. He'll need his strength. Before she could react, he disappeared into the crowd. One of the bodyguards approached. Everything okay? Emily forced a smile. Yes. You sure? Someone just bumped into me. The guard nodded. Neither of them noticed Emily's trembling hands. She remained unusually quiet during the drive back. By the time she reached the estate, her stomach felt tight. Not from hunger, from fear. For the first time, she understood something Damien had known all along. His enemies weren't interested in recipes. They were interested in removing the person keeping him alive. Damien immediately noticed something was wrong. He found Emily standing silently in the kitchen. Vegetables remained untouched on the counter. You've been home 20 minutes. She looked up slowly. I know. You haven't started dinner. No. What happened? She hesitated, then quietly repeated the stranger's words. Damien didn't interrupt. He listened carefully. When she finished, his expression changed. The warmth disappeared completely. Marco entered moments later. Before he could speak, Damien gave an order. Lock the estate. Marco nodded instantly. No one enters. No one leaves. We have a leak. Emily stared. This is because of me. Damien turned toward her. No. It's because of me. They're using you to reach me. He walked closer. His voice softened. I promised you'd be safe. You are. She shook her head. It doesn't feel that way. Damien looked directly into her eyes. I don't make promises I can't keep. Before Emily could answer, the lights flickered once. Twice. Then, everything went dark. The kitchen disappeared into complete silence. Only the distant hum of emergency generators echoed somewhere inside the mansion. Emily's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She couldn't see anything. Then she felt Damien's hand find hers. Firm. Steady. Stay behind me, he whispered. Somewhere nearby, a heavy metal door slammed shut. Someone had entered the estate. And for the first time, the danger Damien had spent months keeping away from Emily had finally reached the kitchen. Darkness swallowed the kitchen. Emily's breathing became shallow. She instinctively tightened her grip around Damien's hand. He gently pulled her behind the thick butcher block island. Stay low, he whispered. She nodded. Somewhere beyond the darkness, footsteps echoed across the tile floor. Slow, measured, professional. Not the hurried footsteps of frightened intruders. These people knew exactly where they were going. Damien reached beneath the counter and quietly removed a concealed pistol. Emily stared at him. You keep that here. I prepare for bad days. Today qualifies. Before either could say another word, the flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. Another followed. 3 shadows moved toward the center of the kitchen. Damien remained perfectly still. His breathing slowed. Years of survival had taught him patience. One mistake meant death. The lead intruder stopped only a few feet away. We know you're here. No answer. We only want the cook. Emily felt her heart stop. Damien's jaw tightened. The stranger continued. Hand her over. We leave peacefully. Damien smiled coldly in the darkness. You came into my house. And expected peace? The man raised his weapon. So be it. Everything happened at once. Damien shoved Emily farther behind the island. A gunshot shattered the silence. Another answered. Wood splintered. Glass exploded. Emergency lights suddenly flickered to life, bathing the kitchen in dim red illumination. The intruders blinked. Damien didn't. He moved first. One precise shot knocked the closest attacker backward. Marco burst through the side entrance with the estate security team. The remaining gunmen fired wildly. Within seconds, the fight was over. 2 attackers surrendered. 1 escaped through the service corridor. The kitchen fell silent once again. Only the sound of Emily's rapid breathing remained. Damien immediately turned toward her. Are you hurt? She slowly shook her head. No. He checked anyway. Her hands, her shoulders, her face. Only after confirming she was unharmed did he finally relax. Marco approached. The estate is secure. Damien nodded. Find out who helped them. We already will. The guards led the surviving attackers away. Silence returned. Emily looked around the damaged kitchen. Broken dishes, bullet holes, shattered lights. It used to feel safe here. Damien lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for. I brought this danger. You didn't invite them. No. He looked at her. But they came because of me. Emily stepped closer. And they failed because you protected me. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Emily smiled faintly. You haven't eaten. Damien almost laughed. The kitchen is destroyed. So? She opened one cabinet, found a loaf of fresh bread untouched by the gunfire. Another shelf held olive oil. A small bowl of sea salt remained unbroken. She tore the bread in half, poured olive oil onto a plate, sprinkled salt across the surface, then placed everything before him. The simplest meals seemed to work best. Damien looked at the bread, then at Emily. You still want to feed me? You still need to eat. He smiled. You never give up. No, she answered softly. I don't. He dipped the bread into the oil, took one bite, closed his eyes, not because he feared poison, because he finally felt peace. Months earlier, he had believed food represented pain. Now, it represented hope. He looked at Emily. "When you first arrived, I thought you were saving my stomach." She smiled. "And now? You saved much more than that." Emily looked away shyly. "I only cooked dinner." "No." Damien gently took her hand. "You reminded me how to live." Tears gathered in her eyes. She squeezed his hand. "And you reminded me that people aren't defined by the worst thing they've ever survived." Marco quietly appeared in the doorway. He saw them standing together. Neither spoke. Neither noticed him. For the first time since the poisoning, Damien Moretti looked completely whole, not because his body had recovered, because his heart finally had. Marco quietly closed the door without interrupting. Some moments deserved privacy. The weeks that followed transformed everything. Victor Kane's remaining network collapsed after several key allies abandoned him without inside information. His influence disappeared quickly. One by one, his operations fell apart. The threat against the Moretti organization faded. Peace slowly returned to the estate. Emily remained exactly where she wanted to be, inside the kitchen. Morning after morning, the familiar sounds returned. Butter sizzling, bread baking, coffee brewing. Damien resumed leading his business empire. But no matter how busy his schedule became, breakfast always happened in the kitchen. Lunch happened there whenever possible. Dinner almost never happened anywhere else. The enormous dining room remained mostly empty. Neither of them missed it. The kitchen had become something much greater than a place to prepare meals. It became the one room where titles disappeared. Damien wasn't the feared boss. Emily wasn't an employee. They were simply two people sharing ordinary moments. One rainy evening, Emily prepared the very first soup that had unknowingly changed both of their lives. Chicken broth, garlic, rice, onion. Nothing expensive, nothing complicated. She placed the bowl before Damien. He smiled immediately. "I know this one. You should." "It saved me." "It reminded you of what?" "Home." Damien slowly lifted the spoon. This time, there was no hesitation, no trembling hand, no fear, only gratitude. He finished every drop, then quietly placed the spoon beside the bowl. "I've been thinking." Emily looked up. "That's usually dangerous." He laughed. "Probably. So? I don't want this arrangement to stay the way it is." She raised an eyebrow. "What arrangement?" "You cooking, me eating." She folded her arms playfully. "I thought it was working." "It is." "Then what's wrong?" "I don't want you here because you're responsible for keeping me alive." Emily waited. "I want you here because life doesn't feel complete when you're gone." Silence filled the kitchen, warm, gentle, peaceful. Emily slowly walked toward him. She rested one hand lightly against his cheek. Months earlier, that face had been pale with illness. Now it carried warmth again. Color. Life. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." A tear slipped down her cheek. She smiled through it. "I was only looking for dinner the night we met." Damien smiled back. "And I was looking for a reason to keep living?" She laughed softly. "I guess we both found more than we expected." "I know I did." He stood, slowly wrapped his arms around her. This time, there was no fear, no violence, no desperation, only quiet certainty. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, fresh bread cooled on the counter. Soup simmered softly on the stove. The warmth filling the room no longer came from the burners alone. It came from two people who had unknowingly rescued each other. One by learning to cook with love, the other by learning to accept it. Sometimes the greatest miracles never arrive wearing crowns. Sometimes they arrive carrying a worn apron, a wooden spoon, and a bowl of simple soup.